Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today's review is Joachim Running's new movie, Tron Ares. Taking place 15 years after the events of Tron Legacy, the movie follows Ares being portrayed by Jared Leto, who's a super intelligent program who was created by Julian Dillinger, who goes on a mission to retrieve Eve Kim, who's the CEO of Edcom, and of course, they go in and out of the virtual world and the real world, and of course exploring more of the lore of Kevin Flynn after his disappearance in the late 80s. Tron is essentially one of the biggest cult classics in the sci-fi genre. So much so, the first film being released in 1982 is basically one of the earliest films to really utilise computer-generated imagery, also known as CGI, in its feature film, in a very prominent role, as we do now see a lot of in modern cinema nowadays. And of course, the development for the sequel, being Tron Legacy, was again very arduous at best, with writers leaving and directors coming and going and actors having different commitments. Then it finally came out in 2010. Even though the film did decently well in the box office, the film thankfully has a cult following, thanks to due to its amazing visuals and of course the music done by the legends being Daft Punk, who unfortunately have broken up a couple of years ago. Of course, I myself really do like these films. Particularly, I remember watching the Legacy film when it came out 15 years ago, and I really like it then, and I definitely like it now. So, of course, the development for a third installment was, again, just as equally laborious and at best somewhat torturous, as even more directors and writers came and went. Even some stars, particularly of Cillian Murphy, who was in Tron Legacy very briefly in the movie, was going to have a prominent role in the film but turned it down. And of course, stuff was not getting done at all. So much so, after Tomorrowland back in 2015, that George Clooney movie, after that film flopped, Disney pretty much cancelled any chance for a third film to come out. And so, of course, around that point, they pretty much focused their energy on new live-action Star Wars film, new Marvel stuff, and the live-action remakes that everyone seems to hate more and more. So much so, after the Marvel Star Wars movies began to overstay their welcome, and Disney remakes are starting to get a bit more overreactive or at best radioactive at best. Of course, it was Tron's time to shine again after 15 years laying dormant, particularly with Jared Leto and Greta Lee. And of course, it still has Jeff Bridges, and of course with newcomers like Judy Turner-Smith and Evan Peters. What makes these films extremely prominent in the sci-fi crowd is not just of its incredibly groundbreaking visuals and its gorgeous world building, but also its music, as it really pushes the boundaries of what synth pop music did, particularly in the early film where a lot of synth music was hugely popular around that point, and of course being done by Wendy Carlos, who did work with Stanley Kubrick. And of course, when the 2010 movie came around, it was Daft Punk that did it, particularly in its Legacy sequel. Unfortunately, they have since broken up back in 2021, so there wasn't any chance for them to reunite. But thankfully, Nine Inch Nails came to a rescue when it comes to making the music for this movie. Even though I found it a little bit odd when it was announced, because the lead vocalist Trent Reznor and the other member being Atticus Ross are usually film composers, and it doesn't look like they bring the band much into their film compository work, as in, of course they did win Oscars for Soul, Social Network, and are well known for their works in Queer and Challengers, and of course a lot of David Fincher films recently. But having the entire band come in with them, it feels a little bit odd. It's like if Nick Cave did music not just with his usual friend being Warren Ellis, but brings his entire Bad Seeds band with him. I'm not sure if that would ever work, but I'm kind of leaving it to their creative maestro to kind of work things out for themselves. But how Nine Inch Nails did that music in this movie is, again, rips roars throughout this movie. It's definitely incredibly prominent throughout the movie at best. The music literally makes itself known, particularly from the first scene, and never lets go throughout the entirety of the movie, as in it is very dominant in this music. In this movie, it is just incredible. It definitely does honour the spirit of the original film as well as the sequel, as in a lot of synths and a lot of some maybe some like loud garing like synths out there, and of course their own tendencies, like the rough vocals of Trent Reznor to throw in occasionally, and some metal elements to throw in for good measure. And what I also do give props for again, a Tron film series is the ability to reinvent itself with its new installment, even though they may take like 15 years to get another one. For this one, what's different about this time, as in from the other two, where it's about a man who ends up in a virtual reality computer program. In this time, what if the virtual reality computer program came to us? As in, essentially think of a reverse Sword Art Online. Instead of coming to that, it comes to us, essentially. Again, I find that a very intriguing concept, particularly as we're in now like the advent of the AI being used in a more commonplace practice, and being essentially now seen as a more modern version of like the advent of the technologies like domesticated computers or something like that, or smart televisions, like basically crossing boundaries of our modern use of AI, which again found definitely its ideas to be very intriguing. And the movie's visuals are again incredibly amazing in this movie. Like, again, the movie definitely understood what made the first film successful, as in it definitely broke grounds on what could be done with computer generated imagery in a more wider scope. And also definitely keeping a very keen eye on like Tron Legacy, on how to utilize 3D technology and more modern stuff to essentially wield it to your advantage. And of course, with all the Tron settings, pretty much when we go back to its world, which we do see somewhat relatively more briefly as opposed to the other two films, but when they come to our real world, as in they just lit it up. Like, it is just like some incredible visual works through and through. Like, but even though there are like two sequences when the two famous like where the light cycles are like glide through the city, and then when the massive like arching searcher machine just roams through the city, then eventually crashes down. Again, they are two actually pretty spectacular scenes to behold. As much as the music is absolutely top level, and of course the visuals are again incredible to look at and to be immersed by it, the movie has like a lot of flaws, and it do tend to gash quite a bit. Like, the screenplay in the movie is very exposition heavy, and at best when it's not going into more exposition areas of the storyline, it feels kind of a bit one note and kind of feels a bit flimsy, a little bit rushed at some points, where you can kind of tell this is still at draft 1 phase, or it felt like it wasn't written to its best potential in that scenario. Otherwise it will just go back to like some exposition areas. And also the chemistry between Ares and Eve, who's portrayed by Greta Lee in this movie, they didn't have like the best chemistry at all. Like, even though they start off as from villains to best friends, a pipeline that we often do see, but I feel like it wasn't the most convincing way how they did it, in my opinion. Of course, the movie does have some throwbacks to, more so in the original 1982 movie, and definitely some callbacks from the 2010 Legacy sequel, but I feel like these throwbacks get increasingly excessive as time goes by, particularly when Ares, portrayed by Jared Leto, enters into the original 1982 version of Tron, and it just becomes a full-blown homage of like throwbacks, or like, oh, you remember this, oh, you remember that, oh, you remember this, oh, you remember that. Like, it gets like really, really excessive, like really super quickly, as in the homage is basically like very original, very rigid looking CGI from the original 80s films, and of course like it's chrome scale, black and white imagery, which all the human characters were in. Not sure if it's due to limitations or it's just the style of it, but again, at least I appreciate they try to replicate it very faithfully. But I feel like when it comes to Jeff Bridges or Kevin Flynn's character coming on to the film, it just feels like, hey, I'm Kevin Flynn, I've been missing for like 30 years and I'm here for my paycheck, bye! That's kind of his vibe, like, oh, hey guys, I was in these other films, so, hey. That's kind of just his vibe, like he's just kind of got hurried in there, like, oh, it's about Kevin Flynn, hey, he's right here, guys, look, it's Kevin Flynn. I feel like that's kind of his vibe where they've written him so late into the film and they just kind of panic saying, hey, he's right here, he's right here. At least there's one pretty interesting comparison that Ares does make when he's having a conversation with both Eve and then later into the movie with Kevin Flynn. Is that he pretty much talks about Depeche Mode, particularly a song Just Can't Get Enough from the Speak and Tell album, which I found pretty bit like, oh, okay, it kind of takes me a bit of a left turn, like, oh, okay, Depeche Mode, okay, and not Nine Inch Nails, just to be a bit of a 4/4 breaker, but I imagine they have some influence or something in common. And particularly it gets a bit more down there, particularly with a conversation with Kevin Flynn, where he talks about who do you think's the better artist, even though you don't know their music, being Mozart or Depeche Mode. I would say and he would draws a comparison between Mozart and Depeche Mode. Yep, you've heard it right. Depeche Mode has apparently quite a lot of lore in the Tron world. I'd pretty much like to live in that time. And particularly so with the performances in this movie, it tended to be really hit or miss. Like Jared Leto as Ares, who definitely has some very interesting concept and definitely some cool ideas about him as an AI entity from the computer program who pretty much wants to become more and more human as the more he explores the world and gets very interested on the small things around about the world, particularly when it was raining and all that and the human interactions. But given how really stiff the delivery from Jared Leto is, it just comes off as very wonkily delivered. Like, oh yeah, it's rainy, better get an umbrella. Like, it kind of feels a bit stilted at best. Particularly so with Jared Leto having a pretty notable cold streak at the moment. Not just with House of Gucci, and as well as Morbius, where he got completely ridiculed to high heaven. And also his alleged really inappropriate and creepy behaviour towards girls, so there's that for you. And there's also Greta Lee, who was in Past Lives, which I do speak very fondly about, who in her performance as I speak is basically how I describe being the okay, this is not going to be my best performance, so I'm going to just have fun with it. That's kind of her whole performance in a nutshell. Like, she kind of just realised, okay, this is not going to be my best role, so I'm just going to have fun with this. And of course there's even Evan Peters as Julian Dillinger, as the CEO of Dillinger, which a company that did highly featured in the original film. In this film, he's essentially, I think Elon Musk, but he openly brags about finding his own publicist, or a type of person that I imagine would openly brag about finding his own publicist. Like, well, I've brought Twitter, now I'm going to be incredibly smashed, come off like I'm in desperate need of a publicist. So that's kind of his vibe. There's Jodie Turner-Smith as Athena, as a second in command to Ares, and someone that does look up to Gillian in this movie. Performances definitely a more convincing villain than Julian at this point. But I don't know what her whole shtick is and why she's motivated to stick more with Julian than with Ares, but I feel like she's definitely one of probably the most underdeveloped character in this movie, in my opinion. But that's kind of good show. Like, the character development, particularly with Ares, is definitely the most at this point. But I feel like Athena is definitely the opposite, as in I don't think I've seen her change like one bit in the movie. Tron Ares is basically the best of Tron and the worst of the Tron series, as in, if you came here for like visual eye candy and some incredible synth music, then you're definitely coming in as well. And if you're coming in for like definitely some great writing and some acting, then this is not exactly a place for you. Even though the movie's visual imagery is definitely on point in this movie, the film's visual effects are great, and the music by Nine Inch Nails is pretty much at the top of its game, and definitely some ideas that are definitely really cool in this movie, how they went around it. But I feel like it did fall apart with like not some great acting and writing that at best feels very exposition heavy, and of course What I find really exhausting about this movie is that the chemistry between the characters is definitely a bit all over the map in my opinion. And again, it does show it's not exactly the Disney bringing their A-game material into this, even though I'm not expecting this to be the best film of the year, but I'm definitely here for a great time. So if you're here for like the some incredibly cool action scenes, but not much else, then this is the kind of film for you. So for Tron Ares, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on this one. So, what do you think of Tron Ares? Let me know in the comments down below, like this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and Letterboxd, and dislike rolls, and bye.